Awesome. Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. This is kind of a one part in an anthology that we've been kind of running of panel discussions for kind of socialization of the joint industry project that we've been working on for the past couple of years. And it's really focused around determining standardized test methods that will hopefully guide correlation between corrosion inhibitor selection and standardized tests that ultimately drive correlation between those testing results and results that are determined in the field and actually provide data that's important to selecting and extending asset lifetime. So really this discussion today is going to be inclusive of panel members that are from third-party laboratories across the world. And we're kind of going to just go through the importance of why these standardized test methods are a benefit to our industry. And it should be a really good discussion, and we'll kind of get going through it. But largely, so this JIP has now kind of been through two different phases. And we're currently entering the third phase, of which is really going to be focused on the standardization of screening tests. So, like I mentioned, really the entire driving force behind this is to find correlation between corrosion inhibitor performance in the laboratory and under field conditions and in the field. And really, this is kind of in this kind of demonstrated by this kind of mind map on this slide, where really between phase 1 and 2 of the JIP, we were largely focusing on step 2 on the top right hand side of the screen, step 3 and step 4, where this was kind of focusing on screening and selection tests under field conditions and trying to understand what those operating boundaries or windows were. So phase 1 consisted of probably I think now almost 200 different interviews of producers, suppliers, vendors, service companies, and really looking at how applications are being designed, how they're being run all across industry, whether that's downhole corrosion all the way to refining corrosion. And so that was a large focus of phase 1. And phase 2, we actually looked to kind of understand how laboratory tests were being performed, how recommendations and how programs were being performed in the field, and really trying to understand what we highlighted as 23 different types of applications in which corrosion inhibitors were applied throughout industry, and trying to provide some guidance on those for people that might not have enough internal guidance themselves. And that kind of ultimately drive that or to bridge that gap between laboratory and field performance. But with the third phase of the JP, we're largely going to be focused on what we have here labeled as step 1, which is kind of really going back to fundamentals and developing standardized test methods that are kind of outside of ASTM or AMP standards for the meantime, because there's lack of standards for them, and really trying to drive collaboration and consistency between third-party laboratories, service company laboratories, producer laboratories, ultimately for the goal of ensuring that there's more correlation between laboratory determined performance and field monitoring and determined performance. That's really the name of the game here, and that's where we're moving with the JP as a group. So just to step back a little bit, there's kind of two buckets where these tests fit into, one being screening tests and the other being selection tests. So screening tests typically are more under standard conditions, not necessarily asset-specific conditions. So these are typically carried out for a shorter duration under standard conditions. They're typically used by chemical suppliers or owner-operators to kind of develop operating envelopes where they might look at a couple of different products and a couple of different concentrations and try to get their product selection and application a little bit more narrowed, so that when they move on to a selection test that's more asset specific, there would be less work inclined or less burden, less man hours, and a little bit more of a guided selection, especially as you look to carry out or extend the duration of a selection test, especially if you're looking at, say, rotating cage autoclaves and running them for 28 days. Obviously, it's not very economical for somebody to run 3 dozen of those for a month each. And when we need to be faster and have a quicker speed to solution. So for the purpose of phase three, we'll largely be focusing on the screening test, and that will be the scope of not only the third phase of the JP, but also the discussion today. Excuse me. So, like I mentioned, this is now our fourth panel discussion that we've had as a group, which is pretty cool. So last week we had one that was focused on chemical vendors, which is pretty neat. We had a pretty wide array of vendors from across the globe on that, which is pretty cool. And previous to that, there was a producer specific panel on February 18th, and before that, more of a midstream or oil transmission pipeline operator and owner panel on February 11th. So today we're going to be talking about testing laboratories, and we have a pretty awesome panel of people attending today. And next week, we will have a collection of SMEs from around the world kind of doing the same thing and talking about the importance of these types of GIPs and essentially why standard methods are important to everybody involved in our industry. So for a list of people that we have today, I guess I should introduce myself too. But my name is Jordan O'Grady. For those of you that don't know me, I am the team lead of Baker Hughes Integrity Management Team in Canada, currently based out of Calgary, Alberta. I'm a chemist and have been working in oil and gas for about 10 years now. I've worked with Champion / Champion X / now Champion and now Baker Hughes. So I'm on the service side and happy to be here. So I'll maybe turn it over to every panelist here and have you introduce yourselves if you can. So first up, Frank.
You muted, Frank. You muted.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Loud and
Frank
clear.
Hornsby, run a lab in Calgary, Alberta, Canada called Corrometrics. Been managing Corrometrics since 2010, so 16 years. We do corrosion inhibitor testing, failure analysis, the ASTM G205 for crude corrosivity, and some routine monitoring. Been in the industry for about 40 years.
Awesome. Andrea?
Who?
Is Andrea here?
She's
She's
here,
here.
but she's muted though.
Ah. Okay, well, maybe we'll come back to that. Milan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Milan Bartos, Intertech, Westport in Houston. I've been in the industry since 97 in corrosion testing, a bit longer than that. Most of my experience came from the chemical vendors, roughly 20 years. And I also worked with the producer, BP specifically, for a couple of years. So, and I've been in this ASTM exercise intermittently since 98. So happy to be here.
Awesome. Sadine.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. This is Sadin Tibal from SET Laboratories in Houston. Basically, we have been in business since 1998 and mostly working with the oil and gas production company and the vendors like Champion X, Nalco, ex-Nalco, Baker Hughes, all those. So we do mostly corrosion testing. We don't do failure analysis, that's corrosion testing, especially inhibitor qualification. So we use a lot of the things that are in those standards, but not really.
That's a common occurrence.
Not really.
Awesome. Damaraju?
Yeah, thank you. I am Dr. Parvatalu Damaraju from ONGC, India. I worked for about 35 years in this upstream quality control basic systems. Especially, I was more towards development of corrosion inhibitor specifications and screening of various corrosion inhibitors in the laboratory for upstream backup production operations and all. That's my background. And then right now I'm working in some hydrogen and all these things as a part of my upstream activities when we are going more towards net zero times. Thank
Awesome.
you.
Thank you. Jose.
Jose may not join today. Jordan.
Okay, so we'll roll with 5. Andrea, did you figure out your mic? Did you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, Jordan, and my apologies to everyone. I had some technical issues with my compatibility of systems. I'm Andrea from Inotech. I'm a corrosion engineer, and what we do is we support corrosion testing, especially for chemical vendors in terms of performance and inhibitor selection and any other type of customized that is usually outside of standardized testing done by industry. So that's what it is. Hopefully it's easy to follow.
Perfect. Okay, so that is awesome. We have a super good group of people today. This is exciting. So how we're going to kind of roll through this is we have about 5 questions that I'd like to kind of hear, your perspective on. So what we'll do is kind of I'll go through the list of panelists kind of in the same order where I'll ask a question, and then you'll all have kind of a chance to respond and either say something that's kind of complimentary or to build on something that another panelist has said, or something totally different. And so when we switch between questions, I'll also flip the order. So say, DiMarzio is not always going last and Frank isn't always going first. But if that sounds cool, we'll get going because I think there'll be lots of good discussion. So this will be for Frank for first. But first question, and kind of like how we like to start this off, is I want to know why do you think the development of standard test methods is important?
So I guess my number 1 point would be qualifies lab competency and personnel and performance of a corrosion rate test. I guess the second point is that it can avoid frustration through the industry. And I guess improve understanding of why certain test methods were selected and what circumstances they should be utilized under. And I think I'll let the other guys chime in rather than go on.
We kind of had some of that last week too, where somebody would go, and then all of a sudden it was like, yeah, exactly what they said. So, Andrea, what are your thoughts around that? Why do you think the development of standard test methods is important?
Thank you for the opportunity to say something here. I'm coming from 2 perspectives. One is the new generations. The reason is probably I'm coming more from what's the new entrance to industry aspect side of things, and it's good that they are aware of the different methodologies that exist to do certain type of tests, especially corrosion testing. That's one. And the second is that it's good as an indicator or benchmarking, because when you're doing some of these evaluations, you don't know if you're equally wrong or equally right. That's the way I say it, but it helps you to have some guidance on what are the minimum requirements to do a good testing in your lab or in your pilots.
Definitely. What about you, Milan?
Sorry, I was muted. Well, of course, I agree what was said, Andrea and Frank. I would add that 1 point, and that's the understanding specifically of the ASTM standard, because there is a lot of misunderstanding out there. And years ago, I was on the same page with those people. There are 2 aspects of it. Number 1 is the level of ASTM standard, talking about guide, practice, and testing method. For many folks out there, ASTM standard is standard no matter what the second word is, and it's the gospel. I mentioned it before on other previous meetings we had that many times I was asked from my colleagues when I was a champion or outsiders, please run the test according to G170, which we all know it's a guide and nobody in the world can do it. So that's the first thing, is the understanding what the level of standards out there. The second thing is the feeling of some people out there that the ASTM standard is somehow better than anything else and has to be followed by letter. An example I want to use here is G5, which is the potential dynamic scanning. And if you are familiar or you look at it later, it's been done with stainless steel 430, right? It's kind of I don't want to say it's not typical material we see in the oil and gas and elsewhere. And if I remember correctly, then IFAD was involved many years in that. The reason they use it because they have a lot of supply of it, and that material could be provided by ASTM if somebody wants to repeat the test. So it comes to that second point that the test doesn't provide any better data than any other testing methodology or test written by companies out there. Is just to confirm that you are running the given test right. If you are within the error bar of that measurement, which was done in the laboratory studies, you're fine. You are qualified to use this test for whatever else you want. So many times, again, I was asked, oh, for this test, we need this metallurgy, whatever it was run on. That's not true. You don't have to. You can use this test with whatever metallurgy you need as long as you are qualified to do so. So that's a missing piece with many people out there, in my opinion, which needs to be kind of, announced or let people know. I'm missing the word English now. What is the proper one? But it is not commonly known, and it's kind of a shame. Oh, no, shame is not the right word. It should be known anyway. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Sadine.
Muted.
Yeah, sorry about that. Okay, I'm looking at the standards. For me, we're talking about precision of standards. Okay, we don't even agree on what's precision, plus or minus what. You're doing a corrosion test. Is it plus or minus what? Because we do a lot of corrosion inhibitor testing. One gives you a 3, one gives you a 6.
Yeah.
Is it really different or not? For me, that's not different. You repeat the test, you might have this, you might change that. Especially short-term tests. So we're not talking about test duration, which basically the shorter the test duration, the spread is really wide. The standards doesn't tell you exactly. There should be a standard that's guide at least. We work with a lot of people who don't know about all the parameters that's in a test.
Yeah.
So a lot of people say, hey, start a 1-day rotating cage test. I'm telling them 1-day rotating cage, you're not going to get anything. That's the rotate. You need a little bit longer. But for me to say it, if I tell a customer, hey, 1 day is not going to give you anything, he would think that, hey, I'm steering him for 1 week because that's more expensive. So the standard needs to help. At least there should be some kind of guide for screening. That's the method, and that's how long the test should be, and that's the spread. There is nothing like that.
Totally. And I think about your comments last week too, when we were talking about the same thing. And there's so many factors that inherently influence the results and the repeatability and the confidence that we're generating.
Yeah.
And with no collective description or data to back up any of that, people are none the wiser because there's no information that describes any of it, right? So I think that is a good opportunity here, right? Is to kind of take the collective brain power and hopefully give something back to industry that will be helpful.
Because sometimes, okay, there is some people they want 50% oil in the test,
Yeah.
and I'm telling them 50% oil in the test. I can tell you the result. The corrosion rate is zero, especially for short-term test.
Yeah.
But they still want to run it 50% oil. That's so for me. That's those standards should at least uh, tell which parameter the customer needs to provide, because sometimes
Mhm.
they just tell you we need to run at this temperature. They don't
Yeah.
even give you the brine composition, nothing basically. We'll have to each time. So that should be making it easier for the people using those tests to know what they need to provide you, like all the parameters to start the test, and for us knowing we'll get all that and we can tell them if they need longer, especially pitting. When now we are talking about those tests, nothing is done about pitting. Well,
Mhm.
this is all uniform corrosion, weight loss.
For sure. For sure. Well, no, thanks for that. What about you, Demarju? Anything different from the group there? Oh, you might be muted if you're speaking. Oh, okay. Well, hopefully there's no connection issues there, and we'll kind of move on to the second question. But I think there's a lot of synergies kind of between what everybody has said there and around the need for this. And I think we can all agree that it's important to at least somehow be on the same page. I think. So the second question that I have for everybody is kind of similar, but maybe more so pinpointed on specific issues. So the question that I'm going to ask is, what do you think are issues if we don't develop standard test methods? So we'll go kind of in the back or in a reverse order. Demarju, are you there, or should I pass you again? Okay. Well, we'll go back to you, Sidine, then. So what do you think are issues if we don't develop standard test methods?
Basically, the issue would be the same as what we have now, because those standards, the way they are,
Mhm.
uh, looking at the standards, nobody used them as is, basically.
Yeah.
A standard for me should be a starting point. All the tests are different. The standard should give you the list of information to start the test and what's important, what's not.
Hmm.
Because, like shear stress, man, a lot of people, when you say shear stress, you run at 1000 RPM. If that's 1020, is it different or really or not? That we don't have any clue about what's different, what's not different.
Hmm.
So
Definitely.
the way that's going, that up to now, the standard, the way they are written, that's not useful really.
Hmm.
They need to be changed to have more detail.
Hmm. For sure. What about you, Milan?
Well, again, I concur what Sareen said, and I would add that the to answer the question is, to me, standards are a reference. It's something which it's like fundamental, basic, and everything else should be built on it. And what is perhaps missing in the standard as they are written these days, there are focus on actually the experiment itself, and they should be maybe some paragraph or two explaining more the purpose and what are the limitations of the test, what are the crucial factors, not necessarily in quantitative terms, but explaining what each of these parameters, like Sareen said, temperature, shear stress, brine composition, at least briefly explain, because those are variables if they're testing, and they will be different from project. The standard method is only the first step toward consistent data. Okay.
Totally agree. I think that would be really useful in a lot of these standards or guides, just exactly like that, just to describe even a little bit, especially so people that aren't familiar with corrosion testing can have a little bit of insight to it as well too when they start to see different results between different labs too, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a great comment.
Yeah, and I would also add, if I may, and not only what is kind of what should be, but at the same time what should not be done. Like Sadin mentioned, a request to run rotating cache with 50% oil. At higher streets you had all wetting, so the test is no longer representative. It may be representative for some line which are highly turbulent,
6 month test, yeah, maybe.
but then you don't necessarily need corrosion inhibitor for that environment, right? So what I was trying, and I think we all agree with it should be put into content in a way, at least
Yes,
as a framework.
for
Thank you.
sure. There should be more context for sure.
Yes.
What about you, Andrea?
I was going to say precisely that the context is missing. One of the challenges we face because usually from our perspective, we try to do what industry doesn't do. But one of the challenges is to understand what industry does. And most of the time, the context of the purpose of the testing is lost because the point of reference are not the same. So let's say if I want to compare how a result is different or how a result is applicable or not, because I don't have a very consistent frame that I'm comparing to, then I don't know if what I'm doing is as valuable or is not. And one of the issues with that is uncertainty of data and also uncertainty in how your method of evaluation is correct or not. And then you have to rely a lot on SME expertise, which is you're lucky if you have it, but if you don't, then you're in trouble. So it becomes more expensive then to understand, and probably you have to do more testing just to come to the same conclusion that you have to probably come earlier if you have these frameworks already defined into when a standard is applicable or not, when are the envelopes or when is the use case that you have to like select if it's not. And from us is even worse because we usually don't do standardized testing. So if we have clarity on what industry does and if we're going to get out of that envelope, then it's easier for us to say, okay, we are going to probably expect different behavior because we are modifying something.
Can you
So
give some
that's
example, Andreas? Because you're making it too general. I cannot follow.
okay. So very, very, very simple example I'll give you. We do a lot of sour testing, right?
Okay.
And then standard test methods. Well, if we want to try something for a sour condition, I haven't seen what are the limits of how much sour is sour. I mean, there are some guidance, but if you have brine and if you have other pitting agents or you have any other type of corrosive species, then you will expect different performance, like what we were talking about, general versus localized corrosion,
Yeah.
right? And then if you're going to for industry, I haven't seen, maybe I'm wrong, but I haven't seen the first test method to evaluate how good of a inhibitor inhibits speeds, especially under sour conditions. So let's say if a standard say, oh, you test under these conditions and we want to change the fluid and then we want to, I don't know, modify something in the process to reflect a different from a standard method application, then that's when it becomes troublesome because then we have to take a lot of assumptions into consideration, right? So let's say there's a baseline and say, okay, if you're doing this standard method under these conditions, then you expect this result because there's a guidance here. But then if you're deviating from there, then it goes even worse. So hopefully that explains my my point of view. So it can get quite how do you call that? You have to make a lot of assumptions based on what you think the frame or the baseline is. That's what I'm trying to say. And if the baseline is not clear, then you even are further and you don't even know how far you are. So, yeah.
For sure.
I, 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 from experience, there is some people who ask for test with 2 ppm H2S. I'm telling them 2 ppm H2S, they will get lost in the gas cylinder. There is, you cannot put 2 ppm H2S. That because they want
Yeah.
to follow whatever the condition they are getting from the field. The field analysis gives 2 ppm. You need to put 2 ppm, and most of the time, 2 to 10 ppm, 15 ppm, that's a corrosion inhibitor for if you for H2S.
Yes,
Basically,
but
you're adding a corrosion inhibitor. You get the blank that's below what the inhibited is. And that's
exactly.
another problem where sometimes either for scale or for H2S, the blank is lower than the inhibited one. And people don't like that when they
Yep.
see those results.
Well, yes, that's a use case example. It's not. I'm just putting that one there as an example
Yeah,
of
no, I'm
a lot of
giving
issues.
some other
Yeah,
example. Yeah,
exactly.
that's we get many time where I tell people run a blank, and after we run the inhibited, but they're in a hurry. They want to run 8 tests or 10 tests with one will be in the blank, and after the blank is so low that basically why are you running those inhibitor? That is because of scale or H2S. The blank is really low. That's 10.
Mhm.
When the black is 10, why do you have all those corrosion inhibitor?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Last but not least, Frank, any comments around what do you think are issues if we don't develop standard test methods?
I guess my first
Okay.
point would be that if we don't develop a standard test method, it's going to facilitate this distrust in the industry about how we can select corrosion inhibitors and even shed a poor light on different companies that are involved in this part of the industry. Another point I could make for if we don't make standard methods, it's going to limit the dissemination of improved corrosion inhibitor chemistries. If we had standard methods, we could more readily agree that new products are better or worse than others.
Definitely. Yeah. Great
Can I
comments,
can I
Frank.
add something that I guess Frank remind me of something. Uh, Most of the time, that's the oil company that's decide the procedure. We don't have a choice as a lab. Most of the time, the oil company, what they call them, the EEP or whatever, they are the one who decide which test to do. If they don't want to follow ASTM standard, they don't follow it.
Mhm.
So they tell us to do it that way, and we do it that way. And the vendors like Nalco and Baker Hughes, they have to follow that procedure also.
Mhm.
I agree that a lot of the clients that come in our door, um, well, more of our clients don't have a strong understanding of test methods, and we can often influence the test methodology we look at. There are cases, obviously, where bigger accounts or bigger test regimes where there's in-house experience, but there's a lot of clients that at least come in our door that have very limited experience on how to evaluate corrosion inhibitors. So our input is valuable to them on that.
Mhm.
The most of the oil companies they have a really they have a corrosion engineer, and they all have experienced corrosion engineer. The only problem is each company have their method and they think that's the best.
Mhm.
Each oil company they have their own method and they all think that's better. They know better than, well, I don't want to list the companies, but they all have a specific method that they want to use and they think that's the best. So they don't want to follow what the other company is doing or whatever. By experience, there is some companies they have a database using only that procedure. They don't want to change. Even if you have another procedure, they don't want to change because they want the database to be under the same test method, the same procedure.
Mhm. Yeah.
And that remind me, there is the standards. There is a rotating cage autoclave, rotating cylinder autoclave, that's RCA still, rotating. Now I don't know if you know about the Exxon, the one that's where they have. Okay, so what do you call that? This is that's
Yeah, exactly, right? It's like their specific one, right? And it's
yeah. So
challenging.
we call it Exxon, but hey,
Yeah. And that's part of all of it. And I think that kind of
Yeah,
goes,
Jordan, can I
yeah,
say, can I add something? Yeah.
of
yeah,
course.
I didn't get a chance. That's just I thought actually, okay, I'll intervene. Sure. Sorry for interfering. Actually. No, see, one thing is that when we are dealing with standards, actually, even for the first question itself tells about lot many things. That asset integrity checks and balances are a common feature in any kind of oil industries activities, especially when you start screening the chemicals or even for the failure analysis or even for convincing the operators or even for the regulator also periodic checks and balances when you're doing all the things activities without standard test methods actually nothing is possible actually even sell the product for custody transfer of your crude oil actually to the refineries or even any kind of things even refineries when they want to do some custody transfer to the users end users actually without standard test procedures, as the previous gentleman has said that when you are procuring the chemicals also, there is an understanding, especially when I'm dealing with my own Indian conditions, actually, when we start doing it, it is absolutely right that when we start procuring the chemicals, we set the specifications based on certain kinds of standard test methods and standards available in the industry. And then based on that, you stick to that. You cannot change the course of this thing when you are screening the thing. There is some tendering procedure and all the things. Procurement channels are there in government industries also. When you start doing it, they are were bound to go by that same standard test methods. So to convince the people, actually, suppose I quote ASTM or NACE or something X on ASME or anything like that. It's very easy. My job is very easy. Whether for regulator or even for my own management, everything is easy. And then without any standard test method, it is obviously the entire exercise will be at odds, actually, especially when you are dealing with some kind of triangular complexities here, actually. One is that tailor-made formulations. They are not simple molecules or some kind of solvents or anything at all. They are tailor-made formulations and everybody has got his own blocking agents and everything at all. You need some kind of standard test procedure to have that kind of performance variations need to be seen only, relative only. It is not an absolute test like actually. Another thing is that when you are dealing with multi-phase fluids actually, crude oil or gas and all the things, intermixing of several things and all, it's not that easy unless there is some standard test method which is available, then it's very difficult to see that which one is good and which one is bad, and you will be involving in several kinds of problematic thing. Okay, forget about screening momentarily. You will not be arriving at any kind of conclusion within your own thing, your own consciousness. Actually, okay, I cannot screen any kind of samples. There lies, and I really appreciate. This is the first time that I feel that there is some kind of standard test method. That language itself is coming actually several guidelines are available in the literature actually. There is no standard test method for the corrosion inhibitor thing like that. Everybody follows his own standard. Somebody is passionate about electrochemical tests and somebody is passionate about weight loss methods and somebody think everybody is right actually in this present world. So under these conditions, if ASTM comes out with some kind of standard test method, it is fine. In the absence of that, it will be totally everything will be unreliable. Data will be unreliable and inconsistent quality data, and there will be a lot of safety problems, and even failure analysis will not be proper. All negatives can be thought about. This is all what I want to tell. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that additional comment. And it's, I think everybody is definitely on the same page here, and I think this is a step in the right direction, one of which we need. And so the next question that we had kind of laid out was, was, looking for individual feedback on what do you think challenges and opportunities are when it comes to the development of standard test methods. But I think we've kind of talked a lot about that, and for the in the interest of time, I think I'll likely skip that unless anybody has like a short, really really big challenge or really big opportunity that they see. If not, or not something that has already been discussed by others, we'll skip that and move to the next question. So if anybody wants to add anything to that, happy to do so.
Just I would like to tell once again, I'm voicing my viewpoint. We need some kind of cost-effective methods actually, because you cannot generalize very costly test methods and very laborious test methods like time-consuming test methods. And then these things are not, maybe they are very accurate and precise and all, but then people may not like it. You have to keep in mind with the competition in the world, but several kinds of suppliers will be supplying goods and all. It should be test method should be simple, robust, and cost effective. And then time, it should not be time consuming. Within no time, it should be able to give the results.
For
This is the
sure.
main challenge, to have some kind of test method.
Agreed.
And with some simple chemicals and all the things, it should be applicable for a wide range of chemicals in the market, not for
Mhm.
some one or two specific oil soluble or water soluble or any kind of, but specific formulations only should not be applicable. It should be applicable to wide range of test
Yeah,
methods.
that's fair. What about you, Frank? See you come off mute there.
I think one of the main challenges is going to be able to come up with a repeatable lab test where multiple labs can achieve the same result,
Yeah.
and simplifying it to a level that we can have that concurrence amongst labs. I know in ASTM we've been trying to get a test method for the RCE, and that's been ongoing for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Where we're looking at developing 4 or 5 new test methods that could take decades.
Hmm. For sure. For sure. No, good point.
The rotating, the RCE, you're talking about rotating cylinder electrode?
Yeah.
Okay, that one,
G185.
Hmm.
there is nothing in the standard saying what's the surface finish you need to start with. And that
Good.
makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
In the same lab, we can repeat the test. One start at 100 MPY, the other one start at 40. How do you explain that?
For sure.
We're talking about the same brine, even if we don't change the brine, we just change the coupon. So there is nothing but there is things that are not in the standard, and that's what make it the precision really change.
Hmm. For sure. Well, no, I think that covers a lot of the larger challenges, but also hopefully opportunities. If we try to look at it as a glass half full, where we can begin to describe these types of things that have a large impact on the results that are being obtained.
And
But
to answer sorry, I don't want to Parvatalu.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I know you want short-term test, but there is screening test. There are short-term tests. That one that usually used by vendors. They have 10 different chemicals. They need to test all of them, and they need to test which concentration to use. So that one they use bubble test, RCE test. Those are screening tests. They are short. That's what they are for. But if you have a pipeline and you need to find a corrosion inhibitor for pipeline for long term, you cannot use a short term test because you need to see the pitting. And to get pitting, you need minimum 1 week test.
Mhm.
There is some companies they don't trust anything less than 3 weeks.
For sure.
So that's we would like to have results fast, but for pitting there is no fast result.
Mhm. Well, and if you see it very fast, then you know there's a problem.
Yeah.
but okay, we'll move on to question 4 here. And really, it's kind of about these changes in industry. What has been your experience with them, and specifically, who's led changes? So things like technological advancements, operators themselves based on need, service providers, regulators, financial needs. In your opinion, who's led these changes? And we'll start with Parvalatu. Or
All,
Demerge.
all are equally important, actually, in my opinion. But then
Mm-hmm.
once again, what is the market availability that speaks actually? It's not that you cannot be strict about this particular product or like that. There may be some kind of what is the market, local market that is giving the best price. Everybody wants some kind of cost-effective treatments also. It's not that thing. Suppose something is available in the heaven at very high cost, then nobody will be doing it.
Yeah,
Market availability dictates actually.
for sure. Oh, good comment. What about you, Sadine? Anything different from who's led changes throughout industry in your experience?
I think there is two. That's different. You see, I understand Parvatalu. If you
Yes.
work in inspection company, you have to have you have to say that you inspected the pipe according to some standard, and for us laboratory where basically we follow we follow what they tell us. They want to test corrosion inhibitor by this method. We just do it by that method. So that's the difference. The oil companies, they don't want to change they basically they have their own method and they don't want to give their own method to the other companies. So that's
No,
Mhm.
I slightly differ with you. Oil companies, in my own experience, actually, oil companies do change actually from periodically because we are involved with this changing of specifications and all things like periodically when we do some market survey and all, unless there is some kind of competition among some 3 4 suppliers who are supplying these products and all, oil companies do change actually. It's not the thing that we are hell bent on giving only one particular thing and all the time we want to go for this. In our case, we see what I'm telling is that when something is available in the market, some products are need to be screened by the laboratory.
Mhm.
Laboratory has to have some kind of standard test procedure to convince all the people. Okay, I screen based on some kind of standard test method, and based on that, I have some specifications also. When I screen the products, then best available products, at least some 2 3 products should be available in the market. If only one product is available, that standard, whatever may be the standard you are employing, that they may not be agreeing with that. We may have to modify our specifications based on my own thing. I have to have my own user user made specifications and procedures like.
Mhm. Well, Milan, any thoughts from you, especially around like who kind of spearheaded changes in your experience? Obviously, working for service providers and producers alike.
Hmm. Well, it's just look at this panel. That's for people who are forcing or behind developing the standard, right?
Mhm.
Uh, Shankar and myself, we started G170 98, and I have to say that I admire Shankara's drive still about the same level, unlike me, right? Because he's driving JIP, and it's basically driven by people who need it, right?
Yes.
Who are looking for some uh, unified common ground because of the how many different testing methods and recommendations are out there, which brings me again to the my point I made before, the purpose of this standard that is sometimes misunderstood. How people use it is a different story. But in my books, standard is a reference. It's like calibration, if you will,
Yes.
right? Right? It just say if I do it this way, I'm qualified to do the next step, modifying it. And the statement shouldn't be follow, exactly. You can always say, and for section 3.5, we are modifying it doing that, but it still has a common ground. So, but back to the question, it is people who need it.
Yep.
And in many cases, NACE or AMPP now, ASTM, those standards or reports are typically developed with very small group of people, right, who do it. If you have working groups during the national conference and you may have 30 people in the audience, everybody has smart comments and everything, but 3 weeks, 2 months later, they are gone. And the core people who started the initiative are still working on it, right?
Mhm.
So industry as such, no, it is individual people who see the value and the need for it. Okay.
Love it. Great comments. Great comments. Andrea, anything different from the group there?
Not much. From my point of view about the opportunities, I think there is a great opportunity for education. The reason I say that is because there are so many courses for corrosion people to go and attend, and there's so much of a background information that you should know. Let's say when you're talking about like why your corrosion rate is higher when you start a test versus is low, maybe there is an OCP situation happening in the background that you didn't look at before starting your test, right? Maybe there is some oxygen concentration levels that you're not measuring, things like that. So what it lets me know about this is that maybe having the standard is a good start, but even before you're going to read it, you might have to know certain information in advance and understand corrosion principles. So what I'm trying to come up with is that there's a big opportunity to create any material courses so people can go and learn them if they want to. And there are some working documents. I know there are some working groups by MPP that have some high level information, but still there is not a guidance of like what you should know to be able to understand this, especially if you're new to industry.
Yeah.
So that's an opportunity that I see that is huge there. And in terms of changes, from my point of view, what I have seen is regulators. Now there's a lot of environmental restrictions, especially coming from government, and you might have to consider that in the past probably was not that I mean there was not that I would say taking look into detail. And another thing is probably industry themselves. Like let's say when you have aging assets and fluid changes over time, maybe you have to change your test method because your conditions are not the same as when you started operating the asset. So those are my 2 grains of salt.
Love it. Awesome. And Frank, any additional comments?
I think who drives this are the subject matter experts along the vein of what Milan was talking about, because they're the ones that recognize the need for standardization and testing. They're the ones that deal with the frustration of not having a standardized method to talk to and defend the decisions they make.
For sure. Yeah, I think that's something that we can all agree with. Anybody that operates or has worked in a corrosion lab and has had to kind of share results like that, it's definitely needed. So okay, we're on to the last question, and we're doing okay for time. It's been lots of really good discussion, but the last question for the group there is, once these standard test methods are developed, how do you envisage implementing them into your laboratory once they're kind of published? And we'll start with you, Frank, at Coremetrics.
So I think the thing that's going to drive me is the confidence that it's a good test method and that it meets a certain need for a type of application that are coming in our business door more often. Second factor in implementation of these test methods would be the cost of the apparatus and complexity of methodology.
Yeah, for sure. Huge things that will have to be balanced, right? Like if we, as a group, say, "Oh, you have to buy $400,000 worth of equipment," well, then that changes the ability to do so, right? Andrea, any comments from you?
Well, we are not in the business of developing a standard test method, but what I envision in terms of implementation is understanding what is the baseline foundation for that and see how much is the industry need for those test methods to happen and who needs support. So we are there to support the industry. That's what I can say about it.
Perfect. What about you, Milan, at Entertech?
Well, for third-party labs generally, I think that would make our life easier because a
Mhm.
lot of our effort goes into defining a scope of work when the customer comes with, oh, we need to do can you do the corrosion testing? Often it starts with that, yeah, that's what we are here for, right? Yes, we do, but then we spend a lot of time going back and forth to identify the set of conditions and how they relate to that particular problem. And that conversation depends who you're talking to on the other end. If it's somebody who is knowledgeable or somebody who is young or coming from different segment of the industry, and I'm leaving aside egos, right? I'm now talking about technical knowledge. So now if you are given this is it, this is your testing procedure written to the point, that makes our life easy, very easy, because we would not need to kind of have these discussions. The flip side is because the standard is limited and it does not currently, as far as I know, it doesn't give you the data interpretation insight. What does it mean when you get certain data? So again, we were talking about perhaps having like beef up the standard with some paragraph or section. During the conversation, I thought maybe it would be even better to have some sort of review or joint paper or some symposium during AMPP, specifically focusing on using of standard, what they do, and equally, even more importantly, what they do not do. And if you step back, it is the value of lab data. What for the real field application. I don't know how many you heard. Oh, so in this test, 3-week test, we had no pitting corrosion with the chemical A. Does it mean that if I use it in the field, I will not have any pitting?
Mm-hmm.
And you go like, no, it depends, right? So there is a lot of expectation or different expectation and understanding from on testing lab on one hand and the user or requester on the other hand, who now gets the report and needs to use it to make a decision,
Definitely.
right? Which is a bit outside of the scope of this discussion, but it's equally important because it relates to the use of standards, right?
Definitely. Really good comments. Sadine, anything extra? And just kind of everybody's know we're kind of 1 minute away, so something quick, unless everybody can go a little bit over. But for those
Yeah,
that might have to,
the biggest problem is I think we need the standards for sure, but we need more details in the standard explaining why. I'm looking at the rotating cage standard that says the autoclave has to be 5.7 liter.
mm-hmm.
We don't have we have rotating cage. They are all 2 liters. So when I don't think there is a lot of labs who have a 5.7 liters. Those are plexiglass autoclave. That we don't use plexiglass autoclaves. Yeah.
No,
So
a 5.7 liter Hastellay autoclave would be pretty expensive.
yeah, that's not 1 gallon. That's almost 2 gallons.
Yeah,
Nobody used that.
for sure.
And there is also the time duration of test. That's the duration of test is very important for the results.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the standard doesn't say that this test method should be minimum 1 day or 3 days or 1 week.
For sure. And last but not least, Parvatalu, any other comments around how
Yeah.
you would envision implementing these test methods?
No, thank you. Actually, the implementation part, first we have to convince the management with facts and figures. What are the merits of the standard test which is introduced now, whatever that is there, or what way that improvement can be brought into the system, especially in terms of screening or in terms of failures, actually frequent failures of the system, whatever that screened materials are used in the field and all. That kind of data needs to be generated based on the improved test methods or what are new standard test method is there. then it's very easy to implement, and then we can we can improve our job cycle. And then we have to have a conversation with all the stakeholders. Then only you can implement any kind of standard, new standards or any kind of new procedures and all. You cannot do it arbitrarily from one side. Nobody will agree with that.
Yeah.
It's what my take.
Definitely. No, totally agree. Well, that's great. That was an awesome journey through a bunch of questions. A lot of great experience on the panel there too. Sankara, did you want to kind of say anything in closing there, my friend?
Thanks, Jordan and panelists. Very well organized discussions. Lots of good points. I really appreciate all your time. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Perfect.